Hey everyone, welcome to this video. Excuse me. We're going to talk about how to transform a relationship. So whether that's with another person or just a relationship you have with yourself. And you don't need the help of an expert to do it. Doesn't mean you won't need some tools and some understanding, but you don't need to go to an expert and have them solve your problems for you, okay? So I'm speaking from experience, from actually doing this, okay? And not just once, but many times. And it really works. There's a couple of things we have to consider within it, such as what your starting point is. And I would say the starting point for this to work has to be I actually genuinely, sincerely want this relationship to change. And if that's yourself towards something or it's yourself with another person, that has to be the starting point. The starting point has to be I actually genuinely, sincerely want what's best for myself and for the other person in this relationship. And so within that, we don't want to put any sort of expectation onto how it has to look at the end because we don't really know. Meaning our judgment can be clouded when I think it's supposed to be a certain way, but there's all these feelings and thoughts and reactions and everything going on within me towards my relationship with myself or whatever that particular point is, or the other person. Let me give you an example. um, let's say you're having a disagreement or a conflict with your spouse or like girlfriend or boyfriend, and within that, it's like it's really easy to go into blaming another person, like I'm right, they're wrong, and they're the reason there's a problem here. It's their fault. They need to change. And so when you come at it with all of that idea of like, well, the end result of this is they have to do X, Y, and Z, then, and also even if it's a relationship with yourself, like let's say you're playing video games, you're addicted to video games, let's say, and you're trying to change that. The end result doesn't necessarily have to be I never play video games again, I just don't ever play them. But it also can't be I just want to feel good about continuing to play them every day all day long. Like you don't want to put an expectation on what's going to be. The starting point has to be I want what's best for myself, for the other person, and within that I'm willing to discover and uncover that and realize what that is. Okay, so that's number one. So how does this work? What is it that we do? Here's what I found in my experience, and it's been a process of trial and error. So I'm not saying that this is going to just be like, bam, you get it right and it's everything changes overnight. It's not like that. It's a process. And that's why I would suggest to primarily start with yourself. If you just try to go and challenge other people and change all these every single relationship in your life, you're going to get a lot of resistance, and there's going to be a lot of points where you're still allowing your own ego and desires and reactions and things in conflict internally to come through within that. Now, if you're like me and you like to just go and try new things and not really worry if you make mistakes and you'll learn from those mistakes, then just go for it. But I'm also suggesting that you might want to consider taking something within your life that you're experiencing maybe some conflict within, where it's something just with yourself right now, like towards something else, maybe not necessarily a relationship, although you could do that if you want. But it might be supportive just to start with something simple where the only person who has to change necessarily within that is you, right? It'll be a little bit easier perhaps. Um, there is an advantage though within doing this within your relationships toward others though, because you get to really face conflict. You get to really face your reactions. So there is a certain advantage within approaching resolving conflict with other people because you see where you have to change much more clearly if you're honest with yourself. Okay, so here's the basic point. What I've found to work very well is to look at all the things that I'm reacting to towards this particular situation, particular person. Let's take the example of another person. Let's say you are reacting to your spouse, um, their, let's say you're married or you're in a relationship and your partner or your spouse doesn't pay attention to you. Like they have their own thing they like to go and do a whole bunch and focus on or be with their friends or something else. And let's say you're always having to be the one at home taking care of the kids, or if you're a man and your woman and your woman, if you're a man and your wife or partner is not having sex with you or not paying attention to you or always nagging you, you know, like whatever the context is, okay? Instead of going and talking to the other person about it, because what will happen is you're going to immediately go into a point of blame, of reacting, and they're going to say something that triggers a reaction within you, and then you're going to blame them for that, and then it's just going to be this thing where the only thing that occurs is it builds up a lot of energy, and then maybe you just don't talk to each other for a long time, or maybe you go and you have the makeup sex or whatever it is, and the energy dissipates, but it never solves the problem, and it eventually comes up in another situation or another way or just in the exact same way. So what I found to be extremely effective, and actually the solution, is to first start with myself. And what I would do is I would sit down on my computer or a piece of paper and I would start writing out everything I'm experiencing. And within that, being totally, completely honest with myself as to what I'm experiencing. Even in that moment, if the thought is, you know, so and so is being a real bitch, you know, like write that down. Okay. That way you can look at it later and see, oh, look, I just judged this person or I just projected onto this person, right? You don't want to try to figure that out right now. Just write it all out, the whole story. Like you're telling the story to your best friend who's just listening. And you're like, well, so and so did this, and I thought this, and I felt this way, and everything. But within that, be really be perfectly 100% honest as you can be with everything that you're thinking and feeling. Okay. Now, once you have that out, okay, you can go back and look at it. All right. And you can see, whoa, this is what's going on within me. Okay. And then what you can do is you can start doing self forgiveness on every single thing you see. If you say so and so is being a bitch, then I would say, I forgive myself that I've accepted and allowed myself to think and believe and feel that so and so is being a bitch. And I realize that that is something I am projecting onto this person, that that is something that's existent within me. I'm actually judging myself in some way. And in some way, I'm supporting the continuation, the creation of that pattern. And perhaps that pattern is not even what's really happening. Perhaps there's something else going on. So that would be like a start. Okay. But here's what I like to do. I like to take what I'm seeing in the other person. Let's say it's that example. Because what you don't want to do is say, I forgive myself that I've accepted and allowed myself to react when so and so is being a bitch. That's not self-honest. Now, you might write that and you might look at it, but then you have to be honest with yourself, like, oh, I'm still assuming that they're being this way. I'm still accepting that they're being this way. That's not real self-forgiveness. That's just you actually reinforcing and justifying your own judgment of that other person. Do you really think that's going to resolve the issue? If you're like, well, I'm just not going to react when they're being a bitch, like you can't be thinking that about another person. Okay, it's not acceptable. It doesn't matter what they're doing. You can't be thinking that or feeling that way about another person. That's not real self-forgiveness. You also don't want to say, I forgive so and so for being a bitch. That's not real, because that's like you're saying you forgive them. You can't change them. You can forgive yourself for the reaction, but we have to go even further than that. We have to say, okay, what is it that they're doing that I'm reacting to? And so what has been extremely supportive for me personally is to take what a pattern I see in another person and pretend for a moment like I am that person. Not like I am literally that person, like my name is Susie so and so, but like I'm just me, but I'm acting like that person, if that makes sense. Like that pattern is my pattern. I'm being that way. Okay. And so I place myself in their shoes and I forgive myself as if I'm really doing those things. And I just take it apart. And what happens inevitably, invariably within this, when I'm really being genuine, sincere, honest with myself as that pattern, is I start to understand it more. And I start to not have that reaction within myself towards it. And what I've noticed is that I don't see it as much anymore, if at all. If I really go all the way fully within it, I start to not see it anymore. Did that person change? I don't know. Maybe it was just coming from within me. Maybe because I'm not holding that pattern within me, I'm not holding it within them, and they have more freedom to not act that way, because maybe there's little subtle things I'm doing that are causing that, because I'm thinking this is how it is, this is the way this person is, and I'm acting in a way that reinforces it, and then I'm like, oh, I'm the victim here, I'm the one who's experiencing all the effect of this, when another person's the problem, when I'm not really looking at how I'm influencing it. Now, I'm not saying you have to go in and figure out how am I somehow subtly influencing it. What I've found is there's a far easier way to do that, which is just to pretend like I'm that person. Write self-forgiveness as if I'm that person. Like, and I'm saying here's a guideline I use for myself in terms of whether I'm projecting still even within my self-forgiveness, or whether I'm really genuinely, sincerely placing myself in that person's shoes and forgiving it. If anyone were to read my self-forgiveness, even that person, they wouldn't know I was talking about them. Or someone else wouldn't know I was talking about someone else. They would read my self-forgiveness and assume that was me I'm talking about. Not because they've seen that behavior in me or anything like that, but just because I'm really doing it as myself. I'm not using it as a way to manipulate the other person. I'm not using it as a way to control the other person. I'm doing it for myself to say, I'm going to release this pattern from within myself. So now what happens is, number one, I may not see it anymore. I'm not reacting to it anymore. I'm not thinking about it anymore. Like when I've done this for people where I've never even had a conversation with them after the fact, but I see a pattern that I'm consistently reacting to. Like someone's posting something on Facebook and I'm constantly judging it, thinking about it, reacting to it, being like, why are they saying that? Why are they so stupid? Why are they doing that? Why don't they realize this? You know what I do? I'm like, wait, who am I to judge? That doesn't mean just be like, forget about it, but it keeps coming up. So what I do is I go and do a bunch of self-forgiveness and I write it out. And then what happens is I don't think about that person as much anymore. Like I don't think about him in that context anymore. Right? I'm not sitting there in my head thinking, oh, why did they say that? That was so dumb. Like it goes away because I've taken responsibility for it. And then what the opportunity is that if I do talk to that person, or if I do now go into this point where I'm actually in the presence of that person, I'm no longer reacting to that point and I really understand them more. And so it's like I'm able to speak differently. And I'm able to actually, in a lot of cases, be more bold with that person, be more direct. Because it's no longer like they're saying something and there's like an energy within me reacting. And now also, just to be clear, I'm not only doing it from the perspective of I'm just placing myself in their shoes. I'm also simultaneously looking at how I am reacting to that pattern. So it's like I'm taking the pattern as if it's my pattern. But then I'm also within that looking at how I, separate from the pattern, am reacting to the pattern as well, if that makes sense. So it's like both simultaneously. And I don't put a lot of like thought into when I'm writing self-forgiveness. It's just I let it flow and I just be honest with myself, and whatever points come up, I do the self-forgiveness. Because like my mind will tell me, hey, here's the point, here's the point. It's just like whatever thoughts and feelings come up, when I place myself in that point, I just start doing it, right? And usually for me, there's a point where it's like I get to the end and I'm like, okay, I don't see anything else. And then I write commitment statements. How am I going to change in relation to this? How am I going to commit myself to investigate other points more fully, or whatever it is? And I'm not going to get into all the specifics because you can see examples of how to do this. Okay, I don't need to explain to you the details. You can go look at my blog, the individual and the collective.blogspot.com, or you can go look at other blogs. I would really recommend, rather than look at mine, well, you can if you want. It's not about you should do one or the other. You could do both. But I would really recommend to read Creation's Journey to Life and Heaven's Journey to Life. And I'll put them in the comments on this in a moment. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, you can put them in the comment while I'm talking. Those would be two that I would primarily look at because they're just so clear and they're so specific and they're so just, I mean, they're perfect examples, if that makes sense. And so within that, if you study those blogs, and when I say study, I just mean read them every day out loud, one day at a time, each of those two blogs, Heaven's Journey and Creation's Journey, you will start to understand exactly what I'm talking about. This is how I learned how to do this, by reading these blogs, by studying it, and by realizing, oh, I could do that too. And so anytime I feel myself feeling the need to explain something to someone, feeling the need to argue with someone, feeling the need to convince someone of something. And now, do I do this 100% perfectly every time? I'm not there yet. That is not an excuse, however, for you to say, well, then I don't need to do it perfectly. But I'm just being open with you. If you see points where I'm not doing that, be aware. I am still in my learning process. So I'm still actively looking for those points where I still went into reaction and I didn't just do the self-forgiveness first. So I'm still holding myself to like pushing myself more and more and more. So I don't, the reason I bring that up is because when you look at me, I am not yet the perfect living example of this. I'm just a person just like you who's learning and in a process of learning, right? So within that, that's why I'm suggesting you study Heaven's Journey and Creation's Journey. Don't just listen to me. Don't just read my stuff because I'm still in my learning process, okay? You may take some value for how I express things and how I give an example, and that's totally cool, that's fine. But make sure that if you're like serious, like you wanna start making real changes in your life, in your relationships with others, in general, you wanna make a difference in this world, all of those points, make sure you study these other two blogs primarily. You can do the other stuff too, right? But my self-forgiveness is for me, okay? And it's also for me in the sense of for my children and for other people who want to look at the patterns I have observed and seen in my life and other people's lives, and for my process of deconstructing that. So please feel free, feel welcome to go and look at those and share those if you find them supportive. However, if you really want to get to the real essence of this point, I mean, what I'm saying is you can't dispense with the Heaven's Journey and the Creation's Journey. That's my perspective. Okay, that's what I've seen for myself. And that's what I've noticed for others is when I suggested them to do this and they go and they study those, it's a short period of time pretty much before I start seeing them doing self-forgiveness, right? So, and it really is really effective. So that's something within that point. Um, so what I would suggest is you look at something you're currently in your life feeling very emotional towards, or maybe it's not like it's always feeling emotional, but maybe you've suppressed it, but it's like something you're just not happy with, you're not satisfied with. And look and see like, what is something in my life where I've got a lot of stuff going on in my head or feelings or whatever, and it's just not the way it should be. And just start with what I'm suggesting. Just write out everything you're feeling, kind of like Dear Diary, like you're just doing that. That's the first step. That way you can then reflect on it and be like, okay, I can't lie to myself anymore. I did say all that stuff. That stuff really is in me. It's real easy just if we do stuff in our head to like a thought comes up and then 5 seconds later it's a different thought. You're like, well, I don't think that, I don't feel that way because everything's always changing and shifting and everything. It's like when it's really hard to be honest with ourselves in our mind. It's better to do it on paper where you can't deny what you have there, right? And then do the self-forgiveness. You can do it out loud, or what I prefer to do is write it down. And as I'm writing it, I'm saying it out loud. And I'm not really reading what I wrote. I just am writing and writing and writing and reading it out loud. And then sometimes I'll go back later and read it out loud, right? But generally speaking, I just write it, type it, and say it out loud as I'm doing it. But that's up to you. I would suggest that you do the writing so you have a record of it and that you could eventually share that if you want with other people to support them. But if it's stuff that you find is perhaps right now in your life too personal and you don't want to create conflict and friction with other people unnecessarily, just keep it to yourself. That's totally fine. So take something within your life that you're experiencing, you feel like you're not being your best within it. You feel like you're not experiencing the best with it. You're not living your best, and the other person's not living their best. Something that you're reacting to, annoyed with, frustrated with, emotional towards. And try this process out. When I say try it, I mean do it fully. Don't just like write one self-forgiveness and be like, that didn't work. Like, of course not. Get to a point of clarity. And the way I like to look at it for myself, or the way I like to describe it is, it's like you're wiping the slate clean, just wiping it clean. That way I can look at it again. Because sometimes the window, it gets really muddy and dirty, so we have to wipe it clean, then we can see clearly, right? So that's how I would approach this point. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to place them in the comments below. If you found this video to be supportive or you would like other people to see it, share the video. I would appreciate that. Then I can get more views and I can support more people just from sharing myself, right? But I would encourage you to test this point out and then share your experience, whether you just come back to this video and talk about it, or whether you make a video talking about, hey, this is what I did, and this is what I saw change, and it's pretty cool. Maybe other people should try it. Because let me ask you a question. Can you imagine if every single day, everybody in the world was forgiving themselves for everything they've reacted to and participated in that wasn't best? What would be the result of that? How can you expect the world to change if you're not taking responsibility for that point within yourself? How can you expect others to do it if you're not doing it yourself? Right? So if you find this valuable, please just, give a comment, because that's not for me, it's for everyone else to see, right? Because we, as human beings, we're very social, and when we see other people saying something, then we kind of like tend to, oh, maybe there's something of value here for me to look at, right? That's like when you go onto Amazon, you look for the ones that have a lot of customer reviews, right? Obviously. So if you thought this was supportive, please say, this is cool video, share it, right? And I'll see you on the next one. All right. Take care. Oh, and if there was any questions that I didn't address that you'd like me to address, put a comment. All right. Have a good one. See you later.